Hwang sat beside Jungkook, playfully spooning a bite of fruit into his mouth while giggling. Jungkook, ever the charmer, leaned in slightly and smiled. You still remember my favorite, huh? Taehyung clenched his jaw, watching the interaction with darkened eyes. His grip on the fork tightened, his knuckles turning white. She's doing this on purpose. Of course, Cookie, Hwang said sweetly, resting her chin on her palm as she gazed at Jungkook. Jungkook smirked. You always were the best at remembering the little things. Taehyung slammed his glass onto the table, making both Hwang and Jungkook jump. Wifey, he said in a dangerously soft tone. You're getting quite comfortable, aren't you? Hwang turned to him, feigning innocence. Oh, you don't mind, do you, hubby? She batted her lash, fully enjoying the way Taehyung's patience was wearing thin. Jungkook, sensing the tension, chuckled nervously. Taehyung, you have a lovely home, he said, trying to change the subject. Of course, I do, Taehyung responded flatly, his eyes still on Hwang, and my wife makes it even more beautiful. Hwang coughed slightly, caught off guard by his words. Jungkook raised a brow, but Taehyung wasn't done. He leaned forward, his gaze locked onto Hwang's. But you know it's not beautiful, wifey? He continued, voice dripping with sarcasm. Hwang tilted her head. Taehyung smirked. Watching my wife feed another man at our breakfast table. Jungkook shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Hwang, maybe I should— No, stay, Taehyung interrupted, flashing a fake smile. I insist, let's all enjoy breakfast together. Hwang, determined not to back down, crossed her arms. Why are you jealous, hubby? Taehyung's smirk dropped. Jealous of him? He let out a low chuckle before leaning in dangerously close to her ear. You must be joking, love. I own you. Hwang shivered slightly at his tone, but refused to let him win. She turned back to Jungkook with a bright smile. Cookie, let's eat before the food gets cold. Taehyung let out a dark chuckle. Fine, wifey. You want to play, let's play. He reached for a strawberry from Hwang's plate and popped it into his mouth, maintaining intense eye contact with her. He hummed, licking his lips. Tastes sweet, just like you, right, wifey? Hwang's breath hitched slightly, her plan backfiring as she felt the heat of his stare. Jungkook cleared his throat. So, anyone want more juice? Neither Taehyung nor Hwang answered, locked in their silent battle. Taehyung smirked, leaning back in his chair. Eat up, Jungkook. You'll need energy. Jungkook hesitated. For what? Taehyung's smirk deepened. For running, Jungkook gulped. I need to get out of here. Hwang hesitated for a moment, glancing at Taehyung, who was now casually sipping his coffee, acting completely unbothered. But she knew better. His grip on the mug was a little too tight. His jaw clenched just enough to expose the storm brewing inside him. Shall I stop? She wondered. For a split second, she considered dropping the act, but then she smirked to herself. No, Mr. Mafia needs to be tamed. She flipped her hair over her shoulder, straightened her posture, and turned on her full sassy queen mode. So, Cookie, she began, placing a hand on Jungkook's arm. Do you remember how we used to have breakfast dates back in the day? Jungkook, who was already regretting his entire existence, chuckled nervously. Yeah, of course. He trailed off, feeling the heavy weight of Taehyung's piercing glare on him. Taehyung clicked his tongue and leaned back, arms crossed over his chest, exuding pure arrogance. Wow, breakfast dates, he arched a brow. How cute, his voice dripped with mockery. Hwang ignored him and continued. And remember how I used to steal food from your plate. She giggled, taking a piece of toast from Jungkook's plate and biting into it dramatically. Jungkook gulped. Hwang, he whispered, suddenly glancing at Taehyung, who now had an unsettlingly calm expression. Taehyung tapped his fingers against the table, his patience snapping thread by thread. This little kitten really thinks she can play with fire and not get burned? Hwaeun leaned in a little closer to Jungkook. And Cookie, do you still, wifey? Her words died in her throat at Taehyung's sudden deep voice. She turned to see him, his eyes dark and sharp as a knife, a smirk tugging at his lips. Jungkook looked like he was seconds away from teleporting out of there. Taehyung rested his chin on his hand, pretending to be amused. Tell me something. He tilted his head slightly. Are you really this bold? Or do you just have a death wish? Hwaeun, not backing down, smirked. Why, you mad, hubby? Taehyung let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. Oh no, my love, he leaned in, brushing his thumb over her chin possessively. I'm just impressed by your courage, but don't get too carried away. Hwaeun arched a brow, or what? Taehyung's smirk widened. He leaned in, his lips dangerously close to her ear, his voice deep and slow. Or I'll show your ex-boyfriend just how married you really are. Hwaeun's breath hitched. Jungkook, realizing this was the moment he should leave, awkwardly stood up. You know what? I think I said. Taehyung's voice was so commanding that Jungkook immediately dropped back into his chair. God, why did I come here? Jungkook mentally slapped himself. Hwaeun, trying to maintain her composure, smirked. Oh, and how do you plan on doing that? Taehyung exhaled slowly, his smirk never fading. Oh, wifey, his fingers traced over her wrist, sending chills down her spine. You really want to test me? After their smoky breakfast, the three of them moved to the living room, but Jungkook seems strangely restless, his fingers drumming on his knee, eyes darting toward his phone. Hwaeun tilted her head. You okay, Cookie? Jungkook let out a nervous chuckle, standing up abruptly. Yeah, just excuse me for a second. Need to take this call. Hwaeun smirked, leaning back against the couch, crossing her arms. Oh, and what makes you think he ran away, hubby? Taehyung smirked lazily. The way he bolted out of here like I was about to put a bullet between his eyebrows, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. And let's be real, wifey, he probably realized that sitting here with us was a bad decision. Hwaeun laughed, rolling her eyes. Or maybe he's just busy. Sure, Taehyung drawled sarcastically. Or maybe he just got too scared after realizing that you belong to someone else now. Hwaeun tilted her head at him, her mischievous grin growing. Oh, belong to someone else, she hummed. Well, I don't mind belonging to a strong, muscular man, she sighed dramatically, looking toward the ceiling. I mean, did you see Cookie's six-pack ABS? God, his body is just insane, all bulky and covered with those sexy tattoos. Taehyung's jaw flexed. Oh, and his biceps, so well defined. I remember back when we used to enough. Taehyung's voice was low, almost a growl, his patience hanging by a thread. But Hwaeun, she wasn't done. Back when we lived together, she mused, placing a finger on her chin as if reminiscing. Those early mornings, waking up in his arms, the way he'd wrap me up like a warm, possessive blanket, and oh my God, the showers. Before she could even finish her sentence, Taehyung was on her in an instant. With one swift move, he grabbed her wrists, pinning her against the couch, hovering over her. His dark, fiery eyes bore into hers, his breathing heavy, jaw tight, muscles flexed. Anne's breath hitched. I don't care about your past, Taehyung murmured, voice deep and laced with unshakable dominance. I don't care what you did, or with who. His fingers tightened slightly around her wrists. But I am your present, and I will be your future. His voice dropped lower, dangerously close to her ear. And I will remove every single hindrance that stands between us. Hwaeun swallowed, words failing her for once. Then, as if to make his point crystal clear, he leaned in and placed a soft yet lingering kiss on her forehead. Hwaeun froze. Before she could even react, Taehyung pulled away, smirked, and stood up. See you later, wifey. He turned on his heel and started walking away. But Hwaeun suddenly snapped out of her daze. Her eyes narrowed as she sat up straight. Oh? What happened to don't expect anything from this marriage? I was forced into it. Taehyung halted. Won smirked, raising a brow. Remember those words, hubby, because I do. I remember exactly how you said them to me on the very first night of our marriage. Taehyung clenched his jaw but said nothing. Equals. Won continued, eyes gleaming with mischief. Bo? And let's not forget, she cleared her throat, mimicking his deep voice. I have a girlfriend. It's better if you mind your own business. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. So what happened? Now that I have a boyfriend, it's suddenly hurting your male ego. Taehyung finally turned around, licking his lips as if preparing a response, but nothing came. Won pouted mockingly. Oh, no reply. She gasped dramatically. But I thought you were the almighty KIMTAEHYUNG, the Mafia King. The one who gets whatever he wants. She crossed her arms. What happened, hubby? Feeling a little unequal now. Taehyung's eyes darkened, his lips curling into a small smirk. It's not like you think. Won scoffed. Oh, really? Then what is it like? Please do enlighten me, Taehyung sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't have a choice. Won frowned. What? Taehyung took a deep breath before looking at her with unreadable eyes. I don't have a choice, Won, she scoffed. Oh, please. You're a grown-ass man, not some helpless little kid. You always have a choice. Taehyung clenched his fists, staring at her for a long moment before suddenly saying, Get up. Won blinked. What? Taehyung grabbed her wrist, pulling her up. I'm taking you somewhere. Won yanked her hand back. I said get up, he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Or do you want me to pick you up? Won gave him a WTF look. Fine, she huffed, rolling her eyes. Before she could even properly process it, Taehyung grabbed her hand again, this time intertwining their fingers, and led her outside. He opened the car door for her, making her sit inside, and then got into the driver's seat. As he started the car, Won glanced at him suspiciously. Where are we going? Taehyung smirked. Somewhere you really need to see. Won narrowed her eyes. If you're planning to kill me, Taehyung chuckled. Oh, wifey, if I wanted to kill you. He leaned slightly closer, a teasing glint in his eyes. I would have done it long ago. Won gulped. You. Before she could finish, Taehyung cut her off with a smirk. But don't worry, wifey, he murmured, his voice softer yet firm. I'd rather die than ever hurt you. As the car rolled to a stop in front of a hospital, Won frowned. Won, why are we here? Taehyung unbuckled his seatbelt, his expression unreadable. Taehyung, you'll understand. He stepped out but noticed that Won didn't move. Shaking his head, he walked around to her side and opened the door, extending his hand toward her. His fingers were long, warm, and steady. Taehyung, let's go, princess. Won rolled her eyes but took his hand, letting him help her out of the car. Despite his cold and arrogant nature, he never once raised his voice at her, no matter how much she got on his nerves. That realization made her heart flutter. A man who could control his anger when it came to his woman, that was the greenest flag in the world. Taehyung, let's go, princess. Won rolled her eyes but took his hand, letting him help her out of the car. Despite his cold and arrogant nature, he never once raised his voice at her, no matter how much she got on his nerves. That realization made her heart flutter. A man who could control his anger when it came to his woman, that was the greenest flag in the world. As they walked inside, his hands still intertwined with hers, Won found herself smiling. She didn't even realize they had stepped into the elevator until it started moving. Taehyung turned his head, noticing the soft smile on her lips. Taehyung, are you thinking dirty things about me? You didn't answer, husband, are you? She teased. But he ignored her, his gaze locked on something ahead. Followed his line of sight and saw a hospital room. Her smile slowly faded. Taehyung's grip on her hand tightened before he pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders in a protective side hug. Won whispers, W, who is she? His voice was soft but carried a weight YN had never heard before. Taehyung, Nari, Shin Nari. In glanced up at him, his face devoid of its usual arrogance. Taehyung, she's the daughter of my left hand, Shin Sobin. He took 7 bullets for me. He died saving me. YN's breath hitched. YN, but she Taehyung, she was 17. They took her for 4 days, 5 nights, multiple men. Taehyung, Yeri's brothers. Along with his friends, they all went underground. I've done everything, but I haven't gotten my hands on them yet. YN swallowed the lump in her throat, feeling an overwhelming wave of emotions. YN softly, that's why you're dating her. Taehyung turned to her, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Taehyung, no, I am only dating Lee YN. Before she could respond, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to the tip of her nose. YN scrunched her nose, blinking up at him. You found something? Taehyung exhaled. Taehyung, yes. In a day or 2, I will leave. It's going to be a bloodbath. YN's grip on his hand tightened. Taehyung noticed and chuckled softly, rubbing circles on the back of her hand. Taehyung, don't worry. I'm going for the man who gave up his life for me. For the little girl who once called me Appa, but I will return for you. Her heart ached. She didn't even realize when her arms wrapped around him, hugging him tightly as she nuzzled into his neck. Taehyung, don't start dating that ex of yours behind my back. YN laughed softly against his skin. I'll try to wait. She teased. Taehyung's arms tightened around her, holding her as if she'd disappear. After a long, comforting silence, he pulled back and looked at her. Taehyung, shall we go visit a gynecologist? YN frowned. YN, why? Taehyung leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear. Taehyung, we need to prepare for our honeymoon. 1, then 2, then 3, YN, T. He laughed as she buried her face into his chest, completely flustered. Taehyung, isn't it strange? My wife wants to hide from me, yet she chooses to hide in me.